Is everybody getting good audio? Somebody audio gets enough. Look at that. One second.
Afternoon. I appreciate everybody making time. Today's news conference really is just an opportunity for me to catch you up on some of the things that are going on in the office. I don't speak to you as frequently as maybe I should or as I would like, because oftentimes it's in response to a major incident or circumstance. That's not the case today. Today is just a handful of different topics that I think are absolutely newsworthy and important things for our community to be aware of that are going on here in the sheriff's office. A lot of things that we're accomplishing and proud of, some issues of concern. So I'll talk for a little while and then I'll turn it over to you. I would hope that when we initially sent this out, if there was a topic of concern for you that wasn't really part of the agenda, that you would communicate back so that I could be prepared to speak to it in case there's some factual information I need to review. If you have not and you ask me something beyond that realm, either we'll find you the answer or if I have it now, I'll give it to you. But if not, we'll seek it out and get it back to you. But if we do this in the future to where it's just really kind of an update of office accomplishments and things that are going on, if you have an issue or a case that is important to you, please make sure you let me know prior to getting out here so that I can prepare and answer to your concerns. So first thing we're going to talk about, as you're well aware, the challenge of fentanyl in our community as well as in our jail has been overwhelming. It has taken lives, it has devastated us in many ways, and it's had a huge impact on law enforcement resources, and no greater impact than what's happening in the jails. So in March, and I think that maybe it was the last time that we spoke about it, I talked about a couple of initiatives. First was that we are going to be purchasing body scanners to make sure that All employees, all volunteers, all correctional health staff, anyone entering the jail would also go through a review to make sure that there were no one bad apple in a rather large bucket of a lot of good, hardworking people that was going to potentially harm others or taint the reputation of all of our hardworking employees. We had also talked about a more aggressive stance on efforts to seize these drugs before they get into the jail. And it's not as though it was neglected prior to that, but we put a more dedicated effort. We've utilized our special response team to be part of just review and turning over pods to try to recover drugs. Our detention officers have done an exceptional job of just being more disciplined and just more detail-oriented in searching inmates coming in where it is lawfully appropriate for us to do so. So I want to give you an update on where we were with the seizures. And one of the things that occurred a few months back was County Attorney Rachel Mitchell was kind enough to reach out and express her commitment to work with us and to be as aggressive as possible in prosecuting those who are bringing contraband into the jail. So she has assigned a few prosecutors to work directly with our team so that all cases are reviewed immediately and charges are more expeditious. So from March until July, we have seized over 1,000 fentanyl pills. We have made, I would say, 32 arrests. Obviously, these folks are already in custody, but 32 individuals have been charged with 63 additional felony charges. And that is not the total number because we still have a lot of cases under review and we have a lot of seizures that are yet to be examined to make sure that we can determine exactly what kind of drugs they're bringing in. But last year, I think in totality, we seized a little bit over 3,000 pills. So this is for just a little bit more, I guess, than a quarter. So we're on pace to exceed that number. I feel really good about the effort. I feel really good about the fact that we're trying to drive down the opportunities for inmates to bring drugs in the jail and jeopardize their own safety as well as the safety of others. So that brings me to the next slide. As head of the office, preservation of life is the #1 priority. It is our community, it is our jail population, and it is our employees to make sure we do everything possible to keep everyone safe. I just want to check the stats here real quick. So we have had 200 inmates that have been transported to the emergency room for overdoses this year. That is a substantial number. And as substantial as the number of those who are impacted, you have to translate that also into how many times our employees are delivering Narcan and trying to save and preserve life. They have delivered over 396 doses of Narcan since January 1st. The reason that number exceeds the number of inmates is because a lot of the fentanyl now is mixed with other drugs. That makes it really difficult for Narcan to have the same impact in restoring and resuscitating someone. So it's not uncommon that one person who was overdosed may receive multiple doses of Narcan to try to revive them. The medical examiner thus far this year has ruled 8 drug-related deaths since January due to drug overdoses inside the jail, but that is not going to be the complete number because some of those examinations have not yet been completed and the toxicology is not yet back. But it continues to be a challenge, but with that challenge, I know that we had about a 17% decrease in overdoses in the jail, deaths in the jail, not overdose, deaths in the jail in our fiscal year. So we run our fiscal year from August 1 through July 31st. So it just ended recently. So this last year, which would have been 22-23, the fiscal year, there was about a 17% decrease in deaths in the jail from the previous year. So fortunately, that's moving in the right direction, but it is still a big number and overwhelming challenge. The other part that I touched on is the jail scanners. They are all in the jails now. They're all installed and they are all functional. The step that we're in right now is we hired employees who are going to be specifically responsible for managing the scanners and the property scanners. So the body scanners for the employees, the property scanners for everything that they bring into the jail. I said before, what I did not want to do was use detention officers to perform these duties because they have enough responsibility to start with. I also want to have a sole and separate entity within the organization who are going to be experts in this area. So right now, the first crew of what is about, I believe it's 10 to 12 employees are going through a training academy, and we project that they will be ready to start working in the field August 7th. We are going, although we have the equipment in each jail, We're going to start going jail by jail and staffing it to make sure that we can work out any challenges and kinks. We want to be as fluid as possible, getting our employees into the workplace and not held up in the scanner space. So we're going to have to make sure that we are performing those duties in a very quick and thorough fashion so that it doesn't impact their ability to report to duty and to relieve whoever it is that they're taking over for in the jail. So August 7th is that target date, and we'll continue to build out. I want to touch on a side note. In every profession right now, hiring is difficult. Law enforcement probably the most challenging. And as I look at this duty here, I'm kind of compelled to put a call out to military personnel who are retired now. And if it's military personnel who have sustained injuries or have some form of a restriction in their ability to do other jobs, this is the perfect fit for them. They can work in a great organization in law enforcement. They can be a big part of keeping our jails and our jail staff safe. It's a well-paying job, and there's a lot to be proud of. So we are going to lead with asking military personnel who are retired if they would be interested in coming to work in this organization, because you'll be welcomed with open arms. The other part of this multi-pronged effort to get the drugs out of the jail involved me purchasing 4 new drug dogs. These drug detection dogs are going to be trained solely for that one purpose. They are not going to be bite dogs. They're not going to be search dogs. They're going, they will, but not for people. They're just going to be specifically trained to recover drugs in the jails. Right now we have selected our canine handlers, and they're going through their training. We have all the equipment for it, and we are in the final stage of acquisition of the dogs, so they'll be brought here in the near future. And once they're on board with our organization, they'll go through additional training, and our hope is that we will have every aspect of this particular unit fully functional by mid to late October. It's a very comprehensive program to get them up to speed, so it's going to take a little bit of time. But they will work. There will be 4 dogs, and they will work full-time in the jails on that task. So that's kind of a recap on just the issue of fentanyl in the jails, doing our best to make sure that we're preserving life, training our employees in different areas that have impacted us with this surge of fentanyl. And again, I want to remind you, the bigger problem is inmates coming into the jail with the fentanyl concealed in their body cavities in places where we cannot legally search. And it's not as though they do it just because they know they're coming to jail. Intelligence tells us that in the streets right now, it is a common practice for drug users and abusers to keep the drugs in those places concealed, because they want to make sure that if they engage law enforcement, that they can try to keep that from us and hide their drugs and keep them. So they're willing to jeopardize not only their health, but their life to feed their addiction. And the problem that exists out in the community is just magnified and exaggerated in the jail system. Our next topic that I want to cover is about traffic enforcement. We lose more lives on our streets due to traffic accidents than any other type of crime or loss of life. I remind everyone that it's your responsibility to be a safe driver on the roadways, to be conscientious, to make sure that you're paying attention to where you're going and what you're doing and not your phone. That impaired driving is not only against the law, but it's unacceptable. This office has not had a motor squad in what I believe is the better part of 15 years. And in order to be really a fully effective law enforcement agency to target the issues of bad driving habits and the recklessness that can occur on our roadways, we have to have a unit that is solely dedicated just to traffic enforcement. So the Governor's Office of Highway Safety was kind enough last year to fully fund our first motor squad. So once we received the funding, we went out and purchased the bikes. We selected our motor officers, and I think it just shows 3 here, but there's actually going to be 5 motor deputies. The bikes are fully outfitted. We're waiting on some last pieces of equipment. But these motor deputies are ready to hit the streets, and we hope that they will be out there by early to mid-September. In addition to the bikes, the Governor's Office of Highway Safety also purchased 2 Mustangs, and these are Mustangs with what they call like ghost markings, meaning that you can kind of see them up close, but it's not an obvious patrol car. The bikes in the Mustangs are going to be an enforcement unit that will not only work in the areas that our county is responsible for first responder duties, but I want to work with my colleagues across the county and other municipal law enforcement agencies that if they believe they have a substantial traffic problem and they are open to the idea of welcoming us as a collaborative partner in addressing issues of reckless driving in any part of the community, we are going to be there for them. It is my goal to be extremely aggressive in addressing just everything that we see from the drag racing and the whole fast and furious mentality. It's unacceptable, it's dangerous, it not only disrupts neighborhoods, but it causes accidents that take lives. So make no mistake about it, this commitment here isn't just about fundamental traffic enforcement, it is about sending a strong message that if you're reckless on our roadways, you're going to see a deputy in your rearview mirror and we're going to hold you accountable. And I know that the other agencies are doing an exceptional job also. We just want to be a force multiplier for them and we want to be target specific. So we're excited about bringing motors back to the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. Next, I want to go into the enforcement by our Fugitive Apprehension and Tactical Enforcement Unit, the FATE team, that we started back in 2017. They just made their 900th arrest. And that's a pretty substantial number when you think about the fact that they target the most dangerous criminals in our community. Violent criminals that are above the fold on their threat to the safety of our community. They are dangerous and they are wanted for serious offenses. So the 900th arrest was of the suspect Frank Harrison, who was responsible for the Youngtown homicide that happened just back in July 25th. Our FATE team found him and apprehended him on July 27th, just 2 days after that homicide. The other two folks that you see on there are just a reflection of how serious these targets are, how dangerous they are in our community. The person on the left there, Anthony Runard, I believe it is, that's the murder that occurred in the Tonto National Forest, the dismemberment. Our FATE team went and found him and apprehended him and get him off of our streets. When I say dismemberment, I don't think I have to get more graphic or specific about how dangerous a person can be to our community. And these are the types of people that the FATE team targets. And the one on the right, a while back we had a top 10 MCSO most wanted. This guy was number 4 on our top 10 and he was wanted for sexual offenses. So we are very proud of the work that the FATE team does because they quietly, safely, and effectively go out there and they hunt the predators and they get them off our streets. And there's no greater priority than making sure that the most dangerous criminals are behind bars and not hanging out in the bars in our community. And the last one is one that I know is very important to our community at large, and sometimes I don't even think that they realize that this is still an issue because it occurred with the previous administration. But the Melendres compliance orders from the federal court, all this information is available to you on our website if you ever want to just check on specifics, but I want to give you a recap on where we are. We are in full effective compliance with 187 of 208 paragraphs. There are 2 orders and each order has 2 phases. So for the first order, phase 1, we're 100% compliant, and the second order, phase 1, we're 100% compliant. The first order, phase 2, we're about 83% compliant, and in the second order, we're at 93% compliant. Some of the challenges, one, as you know, is professional standards. And what's frustrating for me as the sheriff is I know that there are a lot of paragraphs indirectly attached to the backlog, which we have driven down month by month. We are right now in a position where we're trying to make the strong argument that some of those paragraphs that are not yet in full compliance should be. The monitors deem otherwise, so it's our hope that through our hard work and dedication and proven outcomes, that they start giving us credit for the paragraphs that we believe we're in compliance for. And the next step would be to go in front of the judge and ask that he review them and determine if he feels differently than the monitors. But we are very close to getting into full compliance, and it is my hope that that we see that success in the near future for the sake of this community. There has not been an incident in this office since 2017 when I took the office that reflected what occurred that led us under federal court oversight. We do not practice biased, racist, discriminatory policing. And if any individuals in this organization go rogue and do something that is in conflict with our values, they're held accountable. We do not ignore nor tolerate violations of policy or law. And every case is investigated. The challenge is the volume is so high because we do investigate all the cases that we can't keep up with the workload because we actually have more personnel assigned to internal affairs and to court oversight than we do to general crimes, which doesn't sit well for me because we are a public safety first organization But we stay committed and true to the judge's orders and the court's orders in an effort to meet their expectations, with the hopes that we'll free not only this organization but this community of the oversight, because we are absolutely deserving of the right to focus on our primary mission of public safety and to show that we are worthy of the authority we've been given, and that federal court oversight is no longer necessary, and that we are not the organization that led to it. We're the organization that ran from it in order to earn the trust of the community and restore the integrity and the reputation of the men and women in this organization. And I think they've done an exceptional job. So that's just kind of an a la carte recap of some of the things that I thought were important to bring to your attention. I'm happy to answer some questions. And again, if you ask me something not in these categories here and you hadn't given me a heads up on it, I may not have your answer right now, but we'll seek it out and get it back to you. So, yes, thank you for raising your hand.
Yeah, just to clarify, the number of arrests that you gave us on screen, is it just inmates, or it also includes officers?
No, those are just going to be for inmates. We had 2 incidents, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I know that for our staff it weighs heavy on their heart, the idea that we're implementing scanners, and to some extent they feel like it could be an attack on their reputation that suddenly we're searching our own employees. There were 2 employees, one that you were aware was arrested for trying to bring fentanyl into the jail, and another one was arrested by a different agency involved in some drug-related activity outside the jail. Those numbers that you saw are for inmates bringing contraband in the jail. But I want to speak not only to the community but to our staff. I have the full trust and confidence in the men and women in this organization and every aspect, every job that they carry, whether it's detention officers, deputies, or civilian staff. I don't question for a moment their integrity or their ethics, but I have a responsibility to make sure if that one bad apple, as I said earlier, tries to taint the hard work and the commitment that all others hold and show every day, I'm going to root that person out. And at the same time, these scanners hopefully go a long way to show the community that we're willing to set a higher standard to prove our worth and to show you that not only are we deserving of this privilege, but that we're trustworthy, and this organization will do even more than any other to show you how transparent we are. And that's what this is. Monica, what are you playing there for us? So to my staff, I trust you. Trust me to trust you to do what's right for the community and for this organization, and that's what this is, a step in that direction of a heightened level of commitment. Go from left to right. I'll work my way around. Go ahead.
With the bullet points sent to us, there was something about the lake tragedies. Is there anything you would want to talk about on that?
Yeah, so we had one, and I think we kind of pulled it out of the PowerPoint just because I was throwing so much material at you. You know, we're still in the dog days of summer, and everyone likes to be recreational, and we have a lot of folks who want to cool off and get out to the lakes and the rivers, and we know that just recently there was a tragedy where I believe it was a 6-year-old little girl died. It's just heavy and it's hard, and all we ask of you is this: do everything you can imagine to ensure the safety of you and your family when you're on the waterways. Manage and maintain and make strong decisions when it comes to anything that's going to impair your judgment. Make sure you're doing everything possible to not only look out for yourself and your family, but for others, because all that recreation is a great family and fun experience, but we see far too many tragedies. I don't think people realize, I don't have the numbers for you, but the number of rescues, I don't have them handy, but we can get them, the number of rescues and the loss of life that occurs in recreational space in the summertime is a far bigger number than I ever imagined before I became sheriff, and that breaks my heart because I know people go out there with the intentions of just enjoying family and friends. So I just compel you to always put safety first and to make sure that if you don't know and you're unsure of something, to call on us and we will be an advocate for your safety. Ma'am?
Sheriff, you mentioned a backlog, so how many pending misconduct investigations remain in the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office?
Oh, pending, and our backlog, I know we've driven it down by about, I'm going to guesstimate, is anybody from PSB in here? I want to say we're down at about 1,700 or so. I know we were over 2,000 at one point. We drive it down every month, but I don't know the total number. That's just the backlog side. The number that's never asked, though, that I wish was, and I want to get it to you, how many have we closed? I think we're approaching 7,000 cases closed. So the backlog number is one that we're working very hard at and very diligent about. But I don't want the community to be confused that cases aren't being investigated and closed. They are. It's just that there's so many because we hold everyone accountable that the volume exceeds our capacity right now. And thanks for opening the door on my other public service announcement. We have plenty of jobs. If you think you're qualified and talented and you want to work in this organization as a detention officer, a deputy, or a civilian staff member, MCSO.org. We welcome you with open arms. Even you guys. I don't know if to do a background on you. I'm not sure I completely trust you. No, I'm teasing. Who's next?
Going back to the lakes, can you talk a little bit about what your guys' presence and enforcement looks like on a typical weekend at a lake like Lake Pleasant? I know we've talked a lot about drownings. The case we covered Friday was, different. But typically, what does your guys' presence and enforcement look like there?
Yeah, we describe lakes as a district, no different than the patrol districts, but it is very different. It is so substantially overwhelming because it's not just as though they're on the boats and the helicopters, managing and enforcing the laws to make sure nobody's breaking the laws out there and focused on rescues. They do everything from basic first aid to life-saving first aid. They're challenged with dealing with the volume, the population, like those that are tubing on the river and those that are on the waterways. When we have fires that occur, and oftentimes those fires are multi-jurisdictional just because of that landscape out there, our team is the one that goes out and secures areas, tries to facilitate the needs of the firefighters, and does evacuations. So it is just a robust, large team of dedicated deputies who have trained themselves even beyond the responsibilities of patrol functions, and they're out there trying to manage, again, a recreational space with all kinds of dangerous and threatening landscape to ensure people's safety. So they're experts in everything from first aid and CPR to extracting a person who went hiking and collapsed somewhere and we have to use the helicopter to get them out of there. They have dealt with boats that are overturned and people who are, they're trying to save from a water tragedy, and oftentimes they're going into the water and recovering bodies of those who, we weren't able to save or their family members weren't able to. So the diversity and the depth of their skill set and their experience is incredible. If they were athletes, I'd call them 5-tool players. And in summertime, they're not only working long and hard, but they're earning their money tenfold on all that they have to do out there. It's a big county, 9,000 square miles, and a lot of it is those waterways in the mountainscape. So they don't get enough credit for the work that they do, but it's amazing. You guys are being so polite that just in order, calming down and making it easy for me. No fighting over anything. One at a time. I set very strict rules.
So the first one, I know you brought up the correctional officer that was arrested.
Yeah.
I know at the time when you had brought it up, you had initially said, it was just him that was arrested, but you were going to look into investigating if any others played a role in helping him, other correctional officers. Has that investigation been finished, and what did you find?
It has. He was a sole operator in that endeavor. And when we did intercept the information that we received to put us onto him, the information indicated that it was his first time in doing it. So we're confident that there wasn't anything that preceded it from his actions. We don't have any other information, thankfully. I wish there was wood around me. And I just have the confidence in our folks that they realize, even in I'm sure it hurts. Two things hurt. Seeing a colleague behave that way and tainting their reputation, as well as potentially a friend going down that path, and then realizing that the community is going to view them through some very high scrutiny eyes. I would just ask you not to. I would tell you that if you spent a day in the jails and saw the work that they do, you would have a great appreciation for them and how hard it is. But at the end of the day, if you do something to harm their reputation, that's I tell everybody I have two jobs: to speak on behalf of this organization, to represent all the sacrifices and hard work that they do, and to be the gatekeeper to make sure that no one stays in this organization that's not deserving of the privilege, and they, if they're going to do damage to the reputation of those who are. So we feel good about the outcome on that investigation, that there were no other actors in it, but we keep a sharp eye on all of our employees in all capacities to make sure we're keeping good people good.
Thank you.
You bet.
The other question, I believe my colleague sent it in, but they were talking about Akeem Terrell's death in the jail. We've heard the internal investigation hasn't been finished. How much longer will that take, and is 2.5 years too long?
I don't know. When you say what's too long for the investigation, I don't know the intricacies of that one, why it's taking this long. I think for anyone who's seeking truth or justice, any extensive time frame is too long, but we want to make sure that we get it right and we have all the facts. I think I'll ask Sergeant Enriquez to get back to you on the status, because I don't know off the top of my head, and I apologize that I don't. But I want it to be expeditious, but I also want to make sure it's factual and thorough. And I think the medical examiner's reports and some other factors that come into play are also contributors to make sure we gather all the information appropriately. So, Sergeant, you'll get that for? All right.
Sheriff, the numbers you put up there, 32 arrests, 63 felony charges, are those incarcerated?
Yes, they're all incarcerated. So arrest is kind of deceiving because they're already under arrest. It's really just new charges. So there's 32 individuals, but there's 64, whatever the number was, charges, and it added to the whatever they were being booked for.
So none of that was that?
No, sir.
Okay. And then you said MCAO assigned prosecutor for all jail contraband. So can you tell us a little more about what that'll look like? And does that mean they'll be handling just cases of inmates bringing, or will they also be the ones who are handling the cases if there are any more employees, that are bringing in contraband?
Yeah. So County Attorney Mitchell, she and I have a very, very good relationship. We meet on a regular basis, and it was a passion for her also because historically we were having a difficult time, and it was frustrating for employees. Sometimes they felt like those cases weren't going into the system quickly enough, and we would see an inmate leave custody while charges could potentially be pending that would keep them in. And that was no fault of theirs. It just had to do with volume. So the county attorney felt that by assigning prosecutors to work specifically with our jail crimes team, as well as these cases aren't just handled by jail crimes now, they're actually handled by a division outside of our narcotics detail, or detail out of our narcotics division. We're just trying to be very thorough, detailed, and matter of fact in doing business as it relates to those types of crimes. So those prosecutors are there working with our team to immediately start processing the cases, make sure that the drugs are evaluated quickly, and that we can get charges on folks before they're released on other charges that are that they're facing while in custody. As it relates to employees, I know we keep going back to that because, yeah, it's a stain for that moment on that individual that reflects on our organization. I'm hopeful we don't see it again. If you don't have a high standard and you don't have high expectations, you can't meet them. So if we cross that road because somebody crosses the line, I'll deal with it. But really, it's the impact on the inmate population that is the heavy lift.
You said 8 related deaths due to overdose in jails since Jan 1.
Yeah.
Do you happen to know on you how many there was in all of 2022?
In custody deaths or drug related?
What were the parameters for this one? You said.
Yeah, we can get you the number. I don't have it off the top of my head. How many were that? But, and again, there's always a little bit of a lag because we have to wait on medical examiner reports to come back of cause of death and things of that nature. But I've said this before. I'm gonna say it again. I've only been in charge of jails for the better part of almost 7 years now. But I've been in this business a long time, and I worked narcotics for a long time. I don't remember seeing an addiction like fentanyl, where not only are people that reckless and committed to bringing drugs into a place where they could face additional charges and stay in jail for a long time by putting it in their body parts because the addiction is so powerful. But in the absence of it, seeing so many inmates who are willing to self-harm because when they're yearning for it and they can't get it and they're going through that withdrawal, it's so painful. And these are interviews with those who have tried to self-harm but survived. They said they would rather pass on than to suffer the way that they are. And that is not a problem that we can solve. Okay, so I hope that everyone hears what I'm saying. The problems that occur in the jail system are really an extension of what's occurring in society. If this drug is that bad and that addictive and taking that many lives everywhere, we need the community to recognize the threat that it poses on your children and your family members and make it priority one. And when we solve it out in society, it'll solve itself inside the jail system because we're dealing with sinners, not saints. And they are, challenged with health issues and addiction issues and alcohol issues and mental health and everything else. And we're doing our best and doing a pretty darn good job of caring for them. But there's no easy days.
I believe at a press conference earlier this year, you said you would, consider releasing information proactively about deaths in the jails, including these overdose deaths. And I'm wondering if you have any update on whether the office is considering doing that.
No, we are, and I think that we were going to utilize the website. Was that what we were doing, Norma, where we were going to try to post monthly if there was any new occurrences. So what we can do is send something out to you guys, like say in the next week, on where to find it and how to find it and how frequently we'll be posting it so it'll be readily accessible to you.
And then one more question. Can you comment on understaffing in the jails? I mean, we're seeing significant vacancies in detention officer positions. It seems like it's only been worsening over the last few years. What is the office doing to address that? Do you have any comment on how that's affecting operations right now?
Oh, it's detrimental to operations. It doesn't matter if you're serving hamburgers or you're trying to care for inmates. Any any business or organization that is short-staffed, that means that those who exist do twice the work. Prior to COVID, so there's 2,700 positions in our jail system, give or take. Prior to COVID, we were at 30 vacancies, and we actually had enough people in the queue that we expected it to be zero with that many people coming into the academies. And I don't know that in the history of the office it's ever been that, that tight a window of vacancies. Post-COVID and now, we're up around, I think, close to 600. And again, that's credit to the employees who are here doing the job. Now, we have seen a decline in the jail population, but I don't want to treat that as though it eases the burden on our employees. But the jail population used to average about 8,500 at times at 9,000 inmates per day. Right now, we hover somewhere between the high sixes to the low sevens. But we have spent, I got to caveat this by saying this year we will again be under budget at the end of the fiscal year by I think $17 million. Okay, so we are very conscientious of how we spend taxpayer dollars. But I've spent probably about $2 to $3 million in the last few years working with a private company in addition to building and supplementing our recruitment team in the organization on ways to rebrand, recruit, target, and incentivize people to come work here. We have seen a 30% increase in salaries on average, for every employee in this organization in the past 5 years so that we can be competitive. Additionally, not just the incentives, but we work on things like wellness programs to make this a great culture for prospective employee. One of the biggest setbacks to detention staff or correctional staff across the state was the elimination of their pension program, which occurred in 2016, and it became active in 2017. Every other employee in this organization, for the most part, has a pension system. And it is unfair and it is insulting to think that our detention staff doesn't get that. So I've been working with the Arizona Sheriff's Association, and specifically Sheriff Rhodes and I at Yavapai are trying to take the lead on working with legislators to restore that. Because if I want to see employees staying here and see it as a career, not a job, and they have to do the dangerous, difficult things that they do, they need to know it's beneficial for the families. So I think that retirement system should be implemented at the legislators, if you're listening, or governor, whomever. This should be a priority for you. Care for the correctional staff and detention staff across this state so that we can recruit and retain the best. Additionally, I think that we should incentivize employees in this profession in public safety and do things like see a reduced tuition for dependents of law enforcement professionals who put 20 years in this profession. There's a lot of things we can do. So if you want to see a more robust law enforcement community, then start rewarding them consistent with their sacrifice instead of expecting them to do more with less. So we're doing everything possible to bring people through the door. But I would tell you, I just think that generationally, for some reason, the idea of working in public safety is less appealing for young men and women than it used to be. And I hope that we turn the tide on that. But that's another thing where criticism, sometimes fair, but oftentimes maybe subjective, has made it unappealing. And we can't have safe streets if we don't have a robust, law enforcement agency.
Can you tell us again how, for the new screening project with the new machines, how many did you figure out that you're going to need total, and how many do you have hired now? I know they're not trained, but like.
Yeah. I think our number was, Jesse, was it 40? Excuse me?
46 is what we need.
Yeah, so Chief Jesse Spurgeon, who's been with the organization how long?
19 years.
He oversees that project. He's done a phenomenal job doing all the research on the equipment and on how to staff and everything. So right now we have about 25% of that team hired. We're still, we have some other folks that are in the queue. I think there's like another 10 or 15 who are going through the background right now for the next surge. But we do want to start in one jail and work out the kinks before we start going from jail to build it all out. You interested?
I'd be interested to come report on it, see the process, take a bunch of.
You want to know the best way to learn about it? We'll employ you there for a year. You test it out, and you let me know how it's working.
And then that's my last question. So, okay, you're going to roll it out in one jail and expand it.
Yeah.
When would you like to have be able to capacity to scan everyone that you want to, every day when you open?
Yeah, I hope by the end of the year that it's fully functional and we've worked all the kinks and that it doesn't hold anybody up for more than a minute or two to get them through and get them into the workplace.
Sheriff, this is kind of an off-the-cuff question.
Anything for an old friend, Rick.
Have you thought much about glory valor and the extradition and what that would mean in Maricopa County when it does happen?
Yeah, I think it's a big deal. You know, Rick, I'm passionate about small victories that have that kind of impact that you realize how important it is when justice is served. But I also realize that little victories that occur just, you know, with the employees in this organization oftentimes really need to be my priority. So I'd be excited about it, but I would tell you that it's not top of mind for me. What's top of mind for me is what this reporter had asked about. How do we rebuild this organization? That to me is the big victory. So that's a big deal. But a bigger deal for me is, as the head of this office, making sure that all of our employees have backups and they have people covering their shifts so they don't have to pull doubles.
The drugs in the jails, you may have addressed this in.
You guys are so good today,
conferences
polite,
about-
raising hands and everything. It's great.
We get along. Going back to the drugs, you may have addressed this in a previous press conference, so I apologize, but are there options for your staff to refer inmates to any sort of treatment or for either drug use or mental health treatment? Just because I imagine it's got to be overwhelming to be dealing with someone going through that withdrawal, as you mentioned. Are there treatment options available?
Yeah, so we have a new program starting up, and it's kind of the newest iteration of our drug recovery program. It's called REDEEM, and it's an acronym for a lot of words I can't remember right now. But what we're trying to do is to build out the dormitories for the female and the male population so that we can house them uniquely and that we can give them the services needed. It's a great partnership with correctional health services where our employees in correctional health are going to be working collaboratively every day on it. And I think when we get that off and get it going, we'll see a huge impact because it usually drives down recidivism for those inmates who are fortunate enough to go through the program. We also, in every way possible, we're trying to make sure that we're an educational facility, if that makes sense, meaning that if you're in our care and custody, whether it is sex trafficking or we have young adults who don't have high school education and getting them in the programs to get their GED, we want to help everybody where they are so that they don't face pitfalls, whether it's mental health or drug addiction or just being ill-equipped when they leave to be successful. One of the other things I'm really excited about is our new county manager. She is passionate about working with the sheriff's office to try to build a transitional facility. And again, I'm like letting the cat out of the bag because this is not a reality yet. It is nothing more than a vision. But for the longest time, we've been trying to figure out if we built a structure that when someone is released from our custody and they're homeless or they have a drug addiction problem or mental health challenges, that if there's a volunteer space where they can temporarily exist until we can connect them with resources so they're not just going back out to the street blindly and without help, how will that help our community at large? So right now it's just a visionary stage, but she's very passionate about it. I'm looking forward to working with her on it because if we can do something like that, and it's done in other communities, so there's some templates that work, then I think we'll really see long-term benefits for people that have these challenges when they leave our custody, that we're preparing them for success.
Going back to the scanners, I just want to clarify, you mentioned you wanted to work out the kinks in one jail before expanding to the rest, but are there already scanners in all of the jails or just to?
Correct. The equipment is installed everywhere and functional. So when I talk about working out the kinks, imagine when you go to the airport and you're catching a flight and TSA is backed up. I can't have that for our staff. They need to, first and foremost, it's their time, but secondarily, they need to go relieve someone who's got to, go home and has been working a long shift. So for us, it's about the flow and the operational aspects of it. How can we be effective in reviewing everything, but get them through as quickly as possible? And we know that it could be as short as a minute to a minute and a half to process it. But our staff is also needs to become acclimated with it from the context that they show up and their keys are in their pocket or they got a pack of gum. It's going to show up as contraband, which means we're going to pull them out and we're going to say, what do you got? You need to put it in the can and send it through the metal detector. So we want to make sure that they're prepared for success coming through. So working out the kinks is really just a process, but the equipment's all in place. We'll build out the staff, and I just want to make sure that we don't inconvenience our detention staff unnecessarily so they can do their job. I think you had a question.
Anything else you want to say too, because you're trying to keep the drugs from coming into the jails, but anything you want to say about maybe working with the community, MCSO, and maybe other agencies are there any new initiatives to try to work on that?
Yeah, we actually have a person whose full-time responsibility is to work with coalitions around the county on drug recovery programs, education programs, prevention, everything imaginable. But I'm old school, and a lot of folks are probably going to disagree with me on this because we've kind of moved in this direction of decriminalizing all drug-related, or at least they're trying to, drug-related offenses. If we were able to get our arms around the drug and substance abuse problem in our nation, we would see crime plummet. We would see health issues plummet. We would see all the ills of society suddenly decline dramatically because we're taking care of our bodies, our minds, and our families. But for some reason, we're unwilling to do that. Everybody wants to make an excuse as to why someone dealing drugs is just misunderstood or has an addiction, therefore what their behavior is, they're not really accountable to it. And that's nonsense. Because if tomorrow I was selling, a poison to you in a pill and all it did was took lives, we would absolutely prosecute that person and put them behind bars. And that's what fentanyl does. Okay? It's poison on our streets, so we have to get our head around. I'm not saying demonize or abandon your family member and friends because they have a substance abuse problem. I'm saying get them help and do everything possible to help them help themselves. But let's stop making excuses for why people are dying in our society or committing crimes to feed their addictions. Because at the end of the day, it poses a threat to the well-being of everyone in society. So we need to be serious about how we attack it. And it's a multi-pronged attack. It is prevention education, it is recovery and rehabilitation, and it is incarceration. I'm gonna take, I know I told you guys I'd give you a full hour, but we're cruising along so well, I'm gonna give you a couple more and you can move on to something bigger and better. Who wants to go next? Well, you look so shy when you're raising your
Well, I
hand.
feel like it's someone on that side's turn.
Oh, we're taking turns now.
You talked about the partnership with MCAO and kind of going off of that. Is there a push from your side working with these prosecutors to push for harsher penalties, specifically when talking about drug dealers? I know in some cases, and I guess I'm not familiar off the top of my head if it's happened here, but in some cases, drug dealers are charged with murder if pills that they've sold have resulted in an overdose death. Is that a conversation that you guys are happening with prosecutors when it comes to charging these drug dealers?
We normally don't get involved in conversations with prosecutors relative to what we believe is appropriate punishment. We'll make recommendations on charges and then they'll evaluate and make determinations there. But I think the bigger problem stems at a much different space. It is, we have plenty of laws on the books, but not all those laws are effective or even truly utilized. So I'll beat this drum again too. When legislators want to take on an issue, when they're well-intended, like I say, it's the problem of drugs in our community, sit down with the professionals, the subject matter experts who happen to be the people who wear badges and the people who provide care for drug addicts, and talk about what is a potential solution. Like if we're going to write a law, make it one that works, not just one you put on the books and you take a victory lap for. The idea that back in the day, if it was a third strike and you're selling a $25 crack rock and suddenly you're getting a life sentence or whatever, that's nonsensical. But at the same time, a person who repeatedly sells drugs and those drugs are taking lives, getting a pass saying, well, if we give them one more chance, they'll do better, that doesn't work either. So let's just be, let's be pragmatic and conscientious and thoughtful and have a conversation. Then when we write laws and pass them, do that with the intent that they're going to solve a problem or be extremely effective to address that problem. So I just think that when we talk about drugs, we have a lot to learn and a lot to do.
Probably mentioned it before. How much money was invested on these scanners and how many jails?
It's in all 5 jails. Was it 6 million? I'm sorry, 2.5. Whew. Overshot that by a long ways. Huh? When you got a $500 million budget, the numbers can get confusing. Yeah, so it was $2.5 million. Again, that came out of existing funds. There were no new. We didn't go above budget. We didn't ask for additional funding. We self-funded those through the savings, and again, we still came in $17 million under budget this year, with a lot to do. Okay. All right, last one. Who's it going to be? Anybody? Anybody? Bueller?
What about funding for the staff to run the screeners? Do you have that nailed down?
Yeah, that's still folded in there also, because we have so many vacancies, so it's in cost savings. I'm going to tell you though, I hope that becomes a problem. I hope I become the sheriff who the organization is so big and robust that we spend every last penny right up to the last dollar for the budget and return nothing, because we have so many folks out there doing a great job on behalf of this community that safety is our #1 priority. And I'll close with that. I'm going to tell you, I feel very passionately that any community anywhere can only thrive if public safety is the foundation for their success. And the reason I say that is because you can't have a successful, sound education system if children can't go to school knowing that they can focus on studying for the test versus sheltering in place. You can't have a healthy community if you have a problem like COVID, and in our jails we're not caring for inmate population, or out in the public we're not providing safety for everyone so that they can have a healthcare system that works. You can't have job opportunities and economic growth if the crime rate is so high that no one wants to come here and invest in a business or buy a home. And you can't have a community that thrives if the reputation is one where there is biased and unethical policing because people of color are being targeted by people in uniforms. So beginning, middle, and end, in my opinion, and it's because this is the profession I chose, no community can thrive if you don't have a sound, ethical, committed public safety base, law enforcement. And that's what we're doing here at the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, and we may have our blips on the screen, but we sure as heck work really hard and we're diligent about getting them corrected. So you want to see a safe, sound, educated, well community, start working with us instead of just pointing fingers at us, and I promise you it'll get better for all of us because we live in the community too. Thank you guys for your time. Oh, one more? What happened? No, that's it? All right. You guys have a great day. Maybe we'll do it again in a month or 6 weeks.